Wang Yang suddenly attacks Gu Kai and lands several punches on him till he's dragged away by his brother's men, leaving Gu Kai coughing up blood. Wu Xingxin has had enough of the drama and asks the boys to leave her alone as she has nothing to do with their fight. But before she can leave with her friend, Wang Yang's elder brother stops her and intimidates her into not leaving as the fight happened because of her in the first place. He then goes on to invite her and her friend to hang out with them. Wang Yang is shocked and reminds him the deal was only to beat up Gu Kai and nothing more. Sensing his intentions, Wang Yang objects, but his brother holds him by his collar, threatening to stay out of his business. Just then, Zhang appears from behind and refuses to let Wu Xingxin go with those hooligans. Wu Xingxin is glad Zhang is there and asks about his new hair. Zhang tells her that Song Yi took him for a makeover. He then asks Wu Xingxin's friend to join them for lunch, which she gladly agrees. Wang Yang's brother can't handle being ignored like that and decides to teach Zhang a lesson. Little did he know by the time he's done plotting, he will be beaten to a pulp by Song Yi. But even then, Wang Yang is not threatened by what he witnessed and warns Zhang against taking Wu Xingxin with him. Irked by his audacity, Song Yi asks Wu Xingxin that she knows the twerp, referring to Wang Yang. Vexed after being called a twerp, Wang Yang also says some hurtful things to Song Yi, and soon they start bickering about who is grosser. Zhang jokes about the two getting along, and finally, Wang Yang admits he lost, but he warns he'll win Wu Xingxin back. Zhang intervenes and says he has already lost the battle because Wu Xingxin doesn't belong to anybody. He adds with a hint of warning to be good to Wu Xingxin or else he won't let him off the hook that easily. Even though Song Yi finds Wang Yang too emotional, easily exploited, and has issues, he still decides to take him under his wing and train him. The group soon leaves for lunch. Later that evening, while returning after sending the girls off to their house, Zhang thanks Song Yi for managing the company meticulously, as he wouldn't have been able to handle things alone. Song Yi smirks and asks Zhang if he's trying to make him barf. Zhang doesn't know how else to say it and tells him he will never repeat what he said ever again. Just then, he gets a text from Wu Xingxin saying that someone reported the afternoon incident as her getting kidnapped, and the school authorities have called her mom. But because she is unwell, Wu Xingxin asks Zhang to come to her school instead. The next day, Zhang visits Wu Xingxin's school and lets out a scream when he sees the teacher. She is the same drunk woman he had saved and spent the night with. She turns towards him somberly and asks him to be quiet when she, too, almost chokes on her spit and fumbles as she introduces herself as Wu Xingxin's homeroom teacher. Su, Zhang introduces himself as Wu Xingxin's brother, clears the misunderstanding about the kidnapping, and tells Su that he took Wu Xingxin with him. He is then made to wait till Wang Yang's dad arrives. Mr. Yang apologizes on behalf of his son and pleads with Su not to expel him. Just then, Mr. and Mrs. Gu arrive and demand answers for their son's injuries. The vice principal apologizes and assures that nothing of this sort will happen again. He then turns to Su and, in a stern voice, asks her to explain what mess her students created. Having heard enough about her methods of educating the class, Su assertively explains what happened is different. Su narrates the entire story, and Mrs. Gu accuses Mr. Yang of his son's behavior, and poor Mr. Yang apologizes profoundly for not raising Wang Yang properly. He asks for their forgiveness and offers to pay the medical expenses, but Mrs. Gu isn't satisfied and wants to send Wang Yang to jail. Wang Yang can't see his dad apologize like that and loses his temper. He calls Mrs. Gu an old hag and asks her not to talk to his dad like that. Mrs. Gu isn't fazed until she sees Wang Yang's sinister expression and realizes he's being serious about hurting her if she continues belittling his dad. So she gains her composure and says she'll deal with him later. She then turns to Wu Xingxin and mocks her, calling her names for being a gold digger and seducing her son. She warns her to stay away from her son and comments on her social stature. But when she threatens to tear her face and leave her body to rot on the streets, Zhang catches hold of her tongue and threatens to rip it off if she says anything else to Wu Xingxin. When Mr. Gu interferes, Zhang pins him on the wall using his foot and threatens dire consequences if they don't leave immediately. Mr. Gu utters a few words under his breath when Mrs. Gu calls the police as she has some connections, but Zhang couldn't care less. Wang Yang is baffled at Zhang's audacious behavior and asks Wu Xingxin if her brother is deliberately trying to get himself in trouble. But Wu Xingxin looks confident and says Zhang is nothing like ordinary people. Just then, Zhang calls Song Yi and narrates the whole incident. He also tells him about the police being called on him, and after giving all the necessary details, he asks Song Yi to deal with the situation. Mrs. Gu smirks as she knows what awaits Jiang once the police arrive and starts demeaning him. But a ringtone interrupts her. It is Mr. Gu's phone, and he gets a call from the district head. The official begins yelling at Mr. Gu for abusing his rank in the education board and trying to get a student expelled. The official then asks him to apologize to Jiang and tells him that Jiang has ties with the Tandu and Gusu underworld, and they don't want any trouble as the elections are nearing. He is also asked to send his resignation letter. Mr. Gu soon hangs up, turns toward Jiang, addresses him as Mr. Jiang, and apologizes for his wife and son's behavior. He assures him they will never cause any trouble again. Mr. Gu also promises that his son will not harass Wu Xingxin, and they will transfer him to a different school immediately. Jiang lets them go, and soon Mr. Yang asks permission to leave as he has work to attend. He also promises to make Wang Yang reflect on his mistake and will try to compensate the school. As Wang Yang leaves, Jiang hands him a card with a number and tells him that if he ever gets in trouble or gets expelled, he needs to call the number, and the person will give him a job and keep him well fed. Wang Yang thanks him before leaving. After everybody leaves, Su asks Jiang about his identity, because what she witnessed is not something an ordinary person can do. One has to be affluent to pull off this kind of an act, but Jiang brushes away the question, saying he is just a businessman, a librarian, a playwright, and an author. Su tells him that her husband knows Mr. Gu, and he is not someone who can be easily swayed by money. Jiang asks for her husband's name, but when she refuses, Jiang clasps her face and declares he is now her husband after they spent the night together the other day, and her ex-husband can now wear a green hat. Su is irked by Jiang's audacity, and she kicks him hard to get him away from her. But Jiang is adamant and asks her to behave or he'll make her regret it. He then pulls her by her arm and asks if she's willing to go out with him now that she is not pregnant. Su yells at him to let him go and says if she knew this would happen, she would have never considered someone like him. Meanwhile, Wu Xingxin stands there, clueless about what is happening between the two. Jiang teases her till Su asks him to get out. Jiang laughs and walks out, and before leaving, he instructs Wu Xingxin not to create trouble anymore. Wu Xingxin starts asking Su all sorts of questions, and Su can't handle the embarrassment. She sends Wu Xingxin to her class and asks her to take care of her brother, because she feels he was dropped on his head when he was young. She also wonders how Wu Xingxin and Jiang are related. Meanwhile, while walking on the street, Jiang sneezes and wonders if someone is bad-mouthing him. Just then, his phone rings, and it is from Wang, who calls him immediately as it is an emergency. He explains that as per Zhao Yi's plan, he has arranged a banquet for Jiang. However, the reason will be explained later, and he asks Jiang to dress up, and he will send someone to pick him up. Jiang cannot help but feel dread. Jiang soon reaches a lavish banquet, where Wang introduces Jiang to Director Deng as a replacement for Zhao Yi, who couldn't attend owing to his poor health. It comes as a surprise to both Deng and Jiang, and Deng regrets calling Zhao Yi's successor a kid. Deng quickly gains his composure and welcomes him with confidence while Jiang is busy in his web of thoughts. He wonders if this is all true and if something really happened to Zhao Yi. Wang praises Jiang immensely and even calls him a real dragon among people. Deng offers to have drinks with them, but Wang politely declines on account of discussing important matters with other important people. After the party, Jiang questions Wang what the party was all about. He couldn't help but notice how weird Wang was acting, and also he made sure to introduce Jiang to all the important people at the party. Wang tells him not to ask many questions, as it is not the right place to discuss such matters. He promises to explain everything later and asks him to rest for the night. They'll pick Jiang up the next day. But Jiang is curious, so Wang takes Jiang to Zhao Yi's place. There, Jiang is astonished to see Zhao Yi in such a frail condition. Zhao Yi coughs and, upon asking, reveals that he might not live for long, as he shows his hand covered in blood. Zhao Yi says he's accepted his fate after the doctor gave him 3 months to live. However, he has a few regrets, but nothing much to worry about. He trusts Jiang's ability that he will carry forward his legacy. Jiang wants to help find a cure, but Zhao Yi says it is useless as it doesn't have a treatment. It has been suffering for a decade now, and famous doctors haven't been able to find a cure. But surprisingly, he feels calm, except for one matter. Wang has been following him for a long time, taking care of Zhao Yi's business, and even though he is strong enough to fight his battles, there are some forces in the city that can topple him. And once he's gone, such forces will start moving to destroy everything he created and worked for. Jiang came as a blessing to him, and after he learned about his feats, Zhao Yi was sure Jiang was the man destined to continue his legacy. He then reveals he has a daughter in the US and wishes to see her one last time before he's gone. Wang shows Jiang a picture of Zhao Hong, Zhao Yi's daughter, and says he would have gone to find her himself, but there will be no one to take care of Zhao Yi then. He also says if something happens to him, Jiang is expected to take care of Zhao Hong. Jiang assures he will always be there to help not only Zhao Hong but also Wang if he ever gets in trouble. Jiang declares he'll honor the promise when the time comes and lights the picture on fire. Zhao Yi then tells him the lessons he learned during his time in the underworld and warns him that a single man cannot compete in army. So making allies and not offending stronger people will help him stay on top. Wang adds that Zhao Yi was a first-class master in wushu in his younger days, and the national martial arts world respected him. Zhao Yi takes a somber tone and tells him about the four overlords of the underworld: the Dragon Emperor, like King Di, Hebei's Vanguard, Wu Tangxin, Southern Tiger, Mao Chengshan, and the Northeast King, Nalan Zong. Zhao Yi apologizes for getting Jiang involved and bringing him under the limelight after he is declared the successor of Zhao Yi. He admits he was surprised when Jiang came back safely after meeting Hebei's overlord, Wu Tangxin. He speculates he must have seen something in Jiang to let him go, or because he is still alive, and Wu Tangxin would have been subjected to his repercussions if he harmed Jiang. But one cannot be sure, and it could be that he's just playing with Jiang, waiting for the right time to strike. However, this is not the important part. Zhao Yi reveals that Jiang must be weary of this one man and must not approach him at any point of time in his life. The man is Shi Changsheng. Zhao Yi still remembers the day he met Shi Chang. It was during his peak years and during his brief period of hesitation, while pointing his gun at him, that Shi Chang took control and crippled Zhao Yi. Zhao Yi still regrets facing the man head-on. Once Jiang returns home from Zhao Yi's place, he can't stop thinking about how he can help Zhao Yi, so he decides to ask the system for an update on Zhao Yi's health. The system, however, pulls Jiang in and takes him to a digital space, where he meets his old self. The old Jiang asks him to worship him as he introduces himself as the system. New Jiang feels he's dreaming, but old Jiang is quick to remind him that with an updated version, he can create things and, in a snap of a finger, creates a table and chairs for them to sit on. New Jiang asks how many points he will require to upgrade his powers so he can cure Zhao Yi. The old Jiang says it will cost him 120,000 points, which is cheap. While Zhao Yi's body is strong due to practicing martial arts, but his internal organs are rotting, and his condition worsens every day. Old Jiang says they need a resurrection method. Finding no other way, the new Jiang decides to give it a shot. Since he doesn't have that many coins, old Jiang suggests gambling and brings out the slot machine. After pulling the lever multiple times and still not landing on a useful reward, Jiang gets frustrated and curses loudly. Finally giving up, new Jiang plops on the floor and asks old Jiang for anything that can extend Zhao Yi's life in exchange for his prestige points. Old Jiang looks in the store and tells him about the Seed of Life for 3,200 points that can increase the lifespan of the consumer by 1 year. New Jiang thinks of buying one every year, but old Jiang puts a rest to his thoughts by telling him the seed can only be used once. New Jiang buys it anyways. Back at his residence, Jiang gets a call from Xiao Wang, telling him about the money transfer to his account after the success of a movie he made and the business running smoothly, but the people from Hebei pulled out of the business for unknown reasons. He shares the idea of opening an import-export business, and Jiang gives him the green light, provided everything is done legally. After the call, Jiang wonders what the Hebei overlord is up to. He then decides to go out and greets Yao at the entrance. Yao immediately unbuttons her shirt enough to give a good glimpse of her bosom, and in a mellifluous voice, calls him her sweet baby boss. But Jiang is not falling for her cheap tricks and startles her by asking her to help him spend $900 million. Yo stands stunned, and once the figure settles in her brain, she screams and asks him if he has dealt with illegal substances. Jiang tells her matter-of-factly that he did some foreign trading with a friend in Gusu City. Ya suddenly pushes him, making him sit on the sofa, and straddles him, claiming all his assets. But Jiang pushes her off of him, and Yo calls him mean for rejecting her for the umpteenth time. She proposes that Jiang become one of the real estate investors with Boss Ma. Jiang finds the offer appealing and calls Boss Ma. As he explains how one of his partners vanished, incurring a loss and leaving him in debt, Jiang struggles to keep Yo off of him. She doesn't back off even as Jiang discusses such an important matter. Jiang agrees to give him $800 million, relieving Bosma of a considerable burden. He assures the income will be tripled as the project is very lucrative. Jang has had enough of Yao slithering on him like a snake, so he clasps her head and lifts her off, making her squirm in pain. Jang is about to hang up when Yo whispers in his ear, cursing him that he'll never find a wife. Jang excuses himself, promising to discuss the details later, and then proceeds to tie Yo up. He then drags her by her collar as she cries, thinking about the trouble that awaits her. The real estate investment was a success, and Jang gave the money to Song Yi to acquire an e-commerce company, which was named Imperial Consortium. The other company that was under Jang was also renamed Imperial. Bosma's real estate company also changed its name to Imperial Real Estate. Jang was made the chairman of the board. China was shocked by the emergence of a group of small industries, and more shocking was that a 20-year-old Jang was leading the company. Even Jang was surprised at the company's humongous growth. One day he gets a call from Song Yi, and Song Yi chides him for still working as a librarian. But Jang argues that he doesn't have anything else to do as Yeo and Song Yi handle all the work. Song Yi changes the topic and asks him to stay at school as he is planning to come and wants Jang to meet someone. Just as he gets off the phone, Lin walks behind him and asks him where he has been the entire week. His family was worried about him because nobody could reach him. She then hands him a picture of a girl that Jang's mom asked Lin to pass on to Jang. His mom wants him to go on a blind date with the woman in the photograph. Lin pouts as she talks about the girl, and Jang notices it. Hiding his smirk, he tells Lin he is not into dating and says he won't go. When Lin tells him his mom has been working hard to arrange the meeting, Jang says he'll convince his mom by saying he's already seeing someone. Lin hesitates a bit before asking if he has someone in mind, and he takes her name because his mom has been fond of Lin since childhood and will be thrilled when she'll come to know. Lin blushes hard and asks who would want to be his girlfriend. She is still in a frenzy when Jang sees Song Yi and tells Lin he'll be leaving, but she is too occupied by her thoughts and blabbering things about their dating. The two men stare at her, clueless as to what is happening to her. They leave her be and walk out into the street, where Wang Yang greets Jang and asks him if he missed him. Jang has an intense look in his eyes before he asks Song Yi who the guy is. Wang Yang can't believe Jang has already forgotten him. He yells out his name, but Jang prefers to call him twerp. Jang doesn't stop there and calls him an idiot for getting expelled just 4 days after Jang had visited the school. Song Yi tells Jang that Wang Yang is his new driver, baffling Jang. But Song Yi assures him the kid is 18 and has recently got his license. Jang doesn't get a say in it, and just like that, Wang Yang becomes his driver. Before leaving, Song Yi tells Jang that he trained Wang Yang to become adept at martial arts and knows the streets very well. Wang Yang stopped listening to their conversation long ago as his eyes were glued to Jang's car. He gets excited and calls Jang Big Brother, asking him if he can take the car for a spin. He also asks about Wu Xingxin, but soon gets stepped on by Jang, who asks him to stay away from her. He also instructs him to call him boss. Wang Yang then relays the message that the Wu brothers have invited him to dinner at Marriott Hotel. Jang takes Wang Yang shopping with him, and they enter the hotel looking debonair. The Wu brothers greet Jang and ask about the kid. Jang warns them not to think less of the kid as they'll be surprised by his capabilities. They soon start drinking, and the brothers flatter Jang by bringing up his fight with Wu Tansen and how Jang won the fight. Jang makes them stop their sycophancy and asks if they need something from him. The brothers cut the chase and tell him they have run into trouble. They had recently invested in a TV series whose actress, Lulu, had some ideas to make their company's business more lucrative. But before they could talk further, she was kidnapped by someone in the north. And when they sent their men to retrieve her, 20 of his men came back dead or gravely injured. They have hired men to tackle the Wu brothers' men, and they can't keep up if the struggle continues, as the thugs intend to keep Lulu for the next 3 months. They can't afford to lose her, and ask Jang to help them get her back. Jang asks them who these people are, and the brothers tell him they are people of the Nalan group. Jang's face turns serious, and he chides the brothers for trying to make him a scapegoat. But the brother denies any connection of those thugs with Master Nalan. Instead, they're just some people on the side of the Ice City. They plead with Jang to help them and promise proportionate compensation. Jang thinks for some time before asking Wang Yang to call Tanzong Min. Once Tanzong recognizes it is Jang, he cheerfully greets him and catches up from the last time they left after their spar. Jang reciprocates and then asks and explains the reason for calling and asks if he can help with the matter in the Ice City. Jiang gives Tanzong a name, Tiger Ronking, and Tanzong seems to know the guy and the fact that many lives were lost in the rivalry. He assures John to leave the matter to him as he, too, is unhappy with the guy making a fuss under his master, Nalan's grace. Jiang thanks Tanzong for his help and tells him to call him for any help he needs ever in his life. Tanzong offers to take Jiang to meet his master the next time he stops by and soon hangs up. Jiang tells the Wu brothers their issue has been resolved, and Ice City won't bother them again. Just then, Wu Zhang gets a call from Tiger Ronking, who apologizes profoundly for bothering them and pleads with him to let Zhang know they will not pose any problem and are even ready to compensate. Since Zhang's work is done, he gets ready to leave, but Wu Zhang insists he accompanies them to a nightclub. Zhang excuses himself to go to the washroom, while the others make their way to the VIP lounge. As he's walking towards the restroom, Zhang passes by a familiar face. He asks her to turn around, but the girl dashes and Zhang chases her. She would have made it away if her ankle didn't twist, and Zhang catches up, asking Wu Xingxin what on earth she's doing in the nightclub. Wu Xingxin struggles to speak, but Zhang wraps his coat around her and chides her for being there past her curfew time and wearing inappropriate clothing. Suddenly, Wu Xingxin bursts into tears and tells him she has no money. Zhang is surprised and realizes he must have forgotten to give her the month's allowance owing to his busy schedule, but he still says she should have called him. When she doesn't stop crying, Zhang admits it was his fault and gives her his credit card for the future so she never has to worry about money. He then asks her to pack her things as he prepares to send for someone to drive her home safely, but someone's voice distracts him. A group of middle-aged men approach them and address Wu Xingxin, teasing her for running away from them. Zhang asks Wu Xingxin if these men were harassing her, and she tells him the guys wanted her to have drinks with them and probably take advantage of her, so she ran. The guys don't back off and continue teasing and calling Wu Xingxin to entertain them, but Zhang kicks one of the guys before he can grab Wu Xingxin. The other guys recognize seeing Zhang with Wu Zong and back off, but Zhang is not done with the chubby guy who tried to grab Wu Xingxin. Zhang is ready to smash his face to a pulp and break his bones, but 3 men attack him before he could lay hands on the chubby guy. Wang Yang appears out of nowhere and injures the 3 attack with one stroke of his knife, apologizing for being late. He asks Zhang if he should eliminate all those men. Wang Yang single-handedly beats the goons while Wu Xingxin and Zhang stand by and watch. Suddenly, someone appears from the shadows, and the chubby man addresses him as Zhao Qi, asking him to finish the brats off. Wang Yang offers to take care of him, but is astonished when Zhao Qi breaks Wang Yang's blade. Zhang is impressed and thinks the kid's talent is being wasted in such a place. Wang Yang has a hard time keeping up and questions Zhao Qi if he would let people harass a woman in their nightclub. But Zhao Qi shows no concern and says his job is to beat anybody causing trouble to a pulp. Wang Yang takes a serious stance when he realizes talking will not help and gives a final warning. In the turn of events, Wang Yang is seriously injured in the fight and coughs up blood. The bat Zhao Qi carries is heavier than it seems and has damaged his internals from the impact. Wu Xingxin gasps as she sees Wang Yang cough blood, but Zhang can't hold in his laughter seeing the Torp Song Yi trained to get beat up like that. Suddenly Zhao Qi subdues Wang Yang and is about to land the final blow on his head when Zhang grabs Zhao Qi's arm and hurls him in the air before holding his body upside down. Zhang threatens to smash his head, but that single move is enough to intimidate Zhao Qi, and he accepts his defeat. Zhang is annoyed it finished before it even started, and he asks Wang Yang to get up as they are leaving. But Wang Yang doesn't get up even after Zhang asks him to because he is disheartened after he loses the fight. He cannot accept defeat and lets out a frustrated sigh. But Zhang reminds him that people who keep dwelling on a past mistake never get better. One needs to learn from it. Zhang hands Wang Yang a lollipop to cheer him up, and Wang Yang promises he'll never lose a fight again. Soon the owner of the nightclub reaches the scene and disperses the crowd by offering free drinks. He then questions his staff and yells at Zhao Qi for messing things up, but gets interrupted by Wu Zhang, who threatens to smash the place to pieces if he continues disrespecting Zhang like that. The owner stands still, too stunned to move, when he realizes Zhang is the underworld overlord. At that moment, Mr. Dewu enters and tells the owner that Zhang is a very important guest, making the owner apologize immediately and show deference. Zhang asks Wang Yang to drop Wu Xingxin home. As the two drive home, Wu Xingxin asks Wang Yang why he's hanging out with Zhang. Wang Yang tells her how Zhang gave him a job as his driver after he got suspended from school. Xingxin hesitates as she confesses Jiang is not really her brother. Wang Yang doesn't look surprised and says he learned about it while training under Song Yi. Xingxin reveals that Jiang has greatly helped her and her mother and treats her like his own sister. Wang Yang agrees that Jiang is very kind and treats his people with dignity and respect. He also realized how naive he was back then and pursued Xingxin only because he was infatuated with her beauty. But he has learned a lot since, and he asks her not to worry about her mother and promises to keep it a secret and help her whenever she needs it. Xingxin thanks Wang Yang, as this is the first time they ever had a real conversation. Back at the nightclub, Zong hurdles the owner and his men in a private room, where he asks Jiang how he will punish them for disrespecting him. Jiang asks Zhao Qi what he would do in such a situation, to which Zhao Qi grabs his bat and swings it, shocking everybody. The owner calls his move stupid, but he ends up hitting his left arm, breaking it. Jiang is impressed by Zhao Qi's skills and offers him a job, while he asks the owner to shut the place after how he was treated. As for the chubby guy, Jiang is particularly annoyed by him because he pursued Xingxin, and above that, he threatens that if something happens to him, his brother, the deputy director of the Lower East Side Police Department, will not leave them. Infuriated by his audacious behavior, Jiang asks Wu Tian to cut off his private parts, as Wu Tian suggested. Jiang has had enough for the day and leaves, wondering what Wu Zhong has arranged for him. He has a nosebleed when he sees a stunning woman sitting on his bed waiting for him, and soon one thing leads to another. The next morning, Jiang leaves before the woman wakes up, and outside of the hall, he is greeted by two men, who hand in the keys and some documents. They tell him the villa's worth $300 million in Pearl Park, a prime land, is a gift from the Wu brothers. The villas are renovated and ready to move in for him. Jiang asks the men to relay his gratitude to the Wu brothers and heads back on his own. After getting a change of clothes, he heads to the library to read books and learn everything he can about the world using his memory cheat ability. Once he's done for the day, he leaves but is stopped by Lin outside school. Jiang grabs her hand, and before she knows it, she's sitting beside him in his car, and Wang Yang drives them to the location of the villas. The villas are more than they could have imagined, with covered parking space, numerous spare rooms and guest rooms, private bars, recreational room, a cinema, a gym, and indoor and outdoor pools are some of the facilities among a plethora of others available in the area. Lin is flabbergasted when she hears the price, but Jiang assures her he is rich. He says his future wife is going to live there, so he can't afford to go cheap, making Lin blush. Jiang also plans to hire maids, workers, drivers, and security on whom he can rely, but then thinks Wang Yang can handle all these duties. Just then, his phone rings, and the editor of Swift Culture Press, the company that published Jiang's work, tells him that his book is listed in all major bookstores around China, and they were wondering if he could join in a signing event for the opening. Jiang outrightly declines because he thinks it is too embarrassing but ends up giving in when the editor persuades him. On the day of the opening, a crowd has already started to form from the wee hours of the day. Jiang is nervous and shivers as the old Jiang appears and asks if he is busy. The old Jiang tells him he sold 3.2 billion copies in the first week, but the new Jiang says he has nothing to do with it and wouldn't want his pictures or personal information anywhere in the book, as it wouldn't affect his prestige points. The old Jiang says he is wrong about that and explains that every 10,000 clicks on the web novel earn him 1 prestige point, and every hard copy of the book sold earns him 0.01 point, and to date, he has accumulated more than 32,000 prestige points. Old Jiang then turns to leave and opens the portal, but before leaving, he advises new Jiang to publish more such books. Jiang takes a shower and strategizes how to earn more points, but the entire thing gets him stressed, so he decides to take some time off and go out to eat. He chooses to have street food and drools at the mere thought. And once he finds a place, he orders lots of dishes and starts eating when the waitresses come with the beer. One of the waitresses is Wu Xingxin, and she freezes upon seeing Jiang, but quickly composes herself and tries to run. But it is too late as Jiang sees her and catches hold of her. He asks her what her excuse is this time, and she says she is afraid to spend too much money. Jiang pulls her cheek hard and asks her to come with him. Wu Xingxin innocently asks if he's taking her to his house, but he smacks her on her head and says he's sending her back to her house. He asks her to quit her job immediately, reminding her of her school the next day, and puts a curfew time on her. Wu Xingxin is nervous as she walks Jiang to her home. She doesn't know if Jiang is angry or just embarrassed by her, and after walking in silence for a while, they reach an apartment. An old couple is sitting outside when they see Wixingson come back and talk to her, asking about the man accompanying her. She introduces Jiang as her professor, and suddenly Jiang finds himself surrounded by neighbors who shower him with all sorts of compliments and comments about how pitiful Wixingson's situation is. Wixingson, however, drags Jiang away from the crowd, excusing herself owing to some important work. She takes him to a more desolate-looking apartment, and Jiang offers to let her and her mother live in one of his mansions as he doesn't like her apartment. But Wixingson refuses politely. Just then, Jiang hears some men asking one of their members to hurry as they're marking it. Jiang asks Wixingson what a demolition crew is doing there, but Wixingson doesn't know. Jiang lets it go, thinking Wixingson can move into one of his mansions if the house is demolished. As they are walking, one of the crew members comments on Wixingson, but Jiang threatens him to watch his mouth. Another crew member steps in and says it was a joke. Wixingson tries to calm down the situation and pulls Jiang to get out of there, but when they use profanities and call Wixingson a derogatory name, the name of a joke, Jiang turns back and lands a solid punch on one of the man's face, sending him flying. The other members warn Jiang about being outnumbered, but Jiang is in no mood to back down. Jiang thinks if he shows the guys any mercy, they may create problems for Wixingson in the future, so he doesn't think twice before punching another guy and asking him which company sent them to tag the building at night. The man, now bleeding and bruised from the punch, says he shouldn't be messing with them and adds he shouldn't have offended the employees of the company like this. When Jiang asks him again, the man reveals they work for Imperial Real Estate, and Jiang is their boss who he doesn't want to offend. Jiang lets out a sigh and tells them he is Zhang Yi. The group stands, mouth agape at the revelation, and then apologizes for their behavior. They fear they'll be fired, but Jiang asks them to leave and see a doctor for the injured. He also says their medical bills will be compensated, bringing tears of joy to the gang's faces, and the matter settles down. Jiang turns to Wixingson and tells him the group works for his company, and the place will be demolished, so he offers to shift her to one of his 3-bedroom apartments. Wixingson finally agrees and reminds herself to pay back for his kindness in the future. As Jiang is about to leave, Wixingson gives him a peck on his cheek, and Jiang flicks her on her forehead. The next day, Jiang is busy reading in the library when a man approaches him and asks if he understands the content of the book he is reading. Jiang says he does and proceeds to appreciate the idea, but only in theory and not in practicality. The man agrees with Jiang's understanding of the philosophy, and the two strikes up a conversation. The man reveals he has been observing him read every day, and not just one but dozens of books. Jiang reveals he has a photographic memory, so he reads to remember the content vividly and use the knowledge wherever necessary. The man spots an economics book and asks Jiang's opinion on China and the world economy. Jiang's answer impresses the man so much that he suggests Jiang should be a lecturer instead of a librarian. He then introduces himself as Fang Tiandu, the president and dean of Tiandu University. Jiang realizes the man standing before him is a big deal, as he is the author of Domestic Authority on Economics, an influential person in the business circle, and has also served as the national advisor for the government. Many of China's government policies are written by him. Jiang immediately gets up from his seat and shakes hands with the man with many accolades. The dean cannot let such talents go to waste and appoints Jiang as the visiting professor at the university. Jiang is reluctant, but the dean very calmly threatens to expel Jiang from the university if he doesn't take the job. Jiang stands there, unable to comprehend that an older man has just scammed him. The following day, Jiang enters the class well prepared, and as soon as he walks in, Lin's friends pull her to ask if the new teacher is her cousin. Lin has a dumbfounded look when she sees Jiang on the podium, who then introduces himself. During the introduction, he spots Lin but stays unfazed. He soon starts the lecture, and even though he had said he doesn't have any experience in teaching, the students think otherwise because they find his teaching methods very polished and the concepts easy to follow. Stay tuned for the next part of this manhwa. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment if you want to see another episode.